Alright, in this video, I want to talk about politics, namely about church and state being separated or joined together, and where Christians ought to stand, on the left or on the right. Ultimately, from my point of view, being a Christian and looking at Jesus' life and his teachings and example, along with the teachings and examples of his apostles, I see that we are to pray for the leadership in government and in religion. But when it comes to government, we're not to get entangled into it, because through the scriptures we see that Satan is the god of this world and the kingdoms are his kingdoms. That's why he offered all the kingdoms of the world to Jesus when he was tempted in the wilderness, when he was fasting for 40 days and 40 nights. So when you're getting into the governments, you're getting into Satan's realm here. We are, as Christians, just pilgrims passing through. Our kingdom is not of this world, just like Jesus. He was just passing through. His kingdom was not of this world, right? As he told Pilate when he was being judged, if my kingdom was of this world, my servants would fight for me. So we are supposed to be of that same spiritual kingdom, not of a physical kingdom. So as a Christian, I don't think we should be getting into the governments, whether it's by being a politician, choosing a politician to support, choosing a side in politics. But, Christians are going to do that anyway, because most Christians are lukewarm and they care about what they see. They don't go by faith. So they want something physical and tangible. And they want a comfortable, easy life. Here, it's because they don't care about actually building up the spiritual kingdom and winning souls. So they're going to get into the governments, and we see this in history, what happens when the church mixes with the government. We see this starting with Jesus' time, where Israel, the religious leadership of the Pharisees and the Sadducees, actually mingled with Rome, saying we have no king but Caesar, and got Rome to execute Jesus. Then they continued by getting Rome to persecute his followers. Then those so-called Christians ended up joining with the state with Constantine, who obviously wasn't a Christian, but people still try to claim he is, where he sought to conquer in the sign of the cross. Yet Jesus said, love your enemies, bless those that curse you, turn the other cheek, when his disciples asked, hey, should we rain fire down on the Samaritan village because they rejected you? He said, no, do you not know what spirit you're of? I came to save men's lives, not destroy them. So just because they rejected him today doesn't mean they won't accept him tomorrow. If you kill them and defeat them physically, you can't have them repent tomorrow. You're damning them. So Paul tells us that our fight is not physical in flesh and blood. It's a spiritual fight. And he says it's against the principalities and the powers and high places of this world. So in the governments, right? So when these Christians followed Constantine and they joined the church and state, it brought some peace to Christians, but to the lukewarm Christians, because the true Christians were still being persecuted, the ones who didn't go along with this. And then when the Protestant Reformation happened, you had the Anglican Church formed with the Church of England formed with the state, and you had Calvinism. He had his own little power structure, not necessarily his own state, but he had his own authority in his own little area there. And once that happened, the church and state formed, and even with the branch off of Calvinism, with the Puritans over here in the Americas, once they got the power of the state, what did they do? They persecuted those who didn't believe the same way they did, where the Anglican Church would kill Catholics, just the way the Catholics were killing the Protestants. The Calvinists would burn people alive for not agreeing with them. The Puritans would burn them alive, claiming they're witches. right? And all these are obviously not Christian ways. So this country was set up to separate church and state so that people could have freedom. So if you were to get into politics as a Christian, I'm starting to see now that you wouldn't be on the right. Because if you were a Republican, you're caring about this world, right? You want the state to continue the way it's going. You want to keep the family values going, where you have the mother, father, and the children all set up, the nuclear family, so that the whole state keeps going and the whole economy keeps going and the country grows along with this Ponzi scheme of the Social Security system keeps going, and you can keep this comfortable life going by keeping that whole structure together, right? But it puts you to sleep. It makes you lukewarm as a Christian. You're not suffering any kind of persecution. Everything's lulling you to sleep so that you're not standing up, you're not fighting back. You think everything's in control and you don't have anything to worry about, except once you ended up joining church and state, what ends up happening is that you have a bunch of people who are not truly Christian, or even the type of Christian that has taken over the church, whether it's Catholicism or one of the Protestant denominations that's mixed with the state. All the people are forced to submit to it, and they grow up in it, so they just go along with it. They don't actually truly believe it. They just go along with it so that they don't get punished, right? So you just create a bunch of lukewarm Christians that are just Christian in name only, or what they call cultural Christian, right? They're all joined together just because it's part of the culture. But they're not truly Christian. They don't actually believe that they are condemned to death and hell by God, and that there's nothing they can do to save themselves. That all they can do is cry out to God for mercy and grace, and then receive that through Jesus Christ taking their place, being the sacrifice for them, so that he can die in their place, being joined to them. And since they join to him, they get to rise with him when he raises from the dead, being covered with his righteousness, receiving his eternal life, as the only one that is righteous is God. The only one that has life is God. So for you to have an eternal righteous life, you need to partake of God's eternal righteous life. They don't truly believe this or even understand it. They're just going along with it. So you just have this lukewarm church where you think everybody's fine, but actually everybody's going to hell. It's the perfect system for Satan, because he got the Christians thinking they won. They got their whole kingdom already set up on the world. Everybody's going along with it, but they're going along with it because they're forced to. God doesn't force us to do this, right? God didn't force us to become Christians. And not only that, he saved us from being under the law to being under grace. And in Acts 15, when they were deciding, hey, what should we do here with all these Gentiles coming in? Because the gospel was just going out to the Jews, but all of a sudden now the Gentiles are coming in. We shouldn't put this law upon them that we couldn't keep, nor our fathers could keep. So what should we require of them? And they were saying, no, they're saved by grace through faith the same way we are, not by keeping the law, right? So they didn't impose any law on them, just said to stay away from blood and fornication, right? It's basically what they told them. Very simple things, right? And now Christians, they want to have their law imposed on others by the state. But you have been set free from the law, or God's not forcing it on you. You're under grace, yet you want people who don't even believe in Christianity to have to submit to that. So you see how it's very anti-Christian when you start mixing the church and the state together. And it's a very lukewarm church where it's not even really Christian. It's Christian in name only. It's hijacking the church to put the church to sleep. It's controlled opposition, where the church is controlled by Satan. And that's where he gets everybody. So if you're truly Christian and you're going to get into the politics, you'd actually be on the left, not because you support abortion and homosexuality and the transgender stuff, But you see that when you actually impose the law that you can't even keep, it actually creates rebellion, right? The whole reason why the left has gone so hardcore with the abortions and the homosexuality and the transgenderism and going that way, and even openly embracing like satanic stuff, getting tattoos of satanic things and the satanic music or whatever, is because of rebellion against being in having the church and the church rules imposed on them, enforced on them. Because when you have the law enforced on you, it naturally creates what is called concupiscence, as Paul tells us in Romans chapter 7. When the law came, it brought up that concupiscence. What is concupiscence? It's the natural desire to sin. Like when your parents would tell you, don't do it. You weren't going to do it, but since they told you not to do it, now you're going to do it because that natural rebellion comes out. Or they tell you to go do something that you were going to go do, but now you're not going to do it because they told you. Because it's our natural desire to fight back and not to be controlled. Right? We want to be free. So when the church actually tries to impose Christianity, it creates that huge rebellion because you're forcing them and not allowing them to choose it and just accept it. So ultimately, if you're a Christian, you would actually be on the left because it opens up that freedom and it opens up the persecution. And you may be thinking, no, that's why we're on the right. We don't want to be persecuted. Yeah, that's because you're not truly Christian. You see, if you're truly Christian, you want the persecution because that allows you to be pruned by God and shaped and molded into the image and likeness of Jesus, where you shine up as a light, where people can see that you're truly standing up no matter what, and that you're actually trying to reach these people, not control them, not force them, but that you're just going to stand up for what you believe in no matter what, and you're not sitting there as a hypocrite like the right in the church-state mix and how they're trying to mix the church and state. You allow them the freedom where that's what I actually believe. I'm not for abortion, but I'm actually for the freedom to go do it because who am I to tell you what you can and can't do? I'm not for homosexuality, but I'm for the freedom for you to be homosexual. Right? I'm not for transgender, changing your gender and having that surgery and permanent stuff. People are killing themselves over that stuff. But I believe in the freedom to go do what you want to do. And then by their freedom of them going to do it, they can learn the consequences of those things. Just like I have done in my past. I've went and done the craziest stuff. And now looking back, I thank God that He allowed me to basically spit in His face and not die from it. And He didn't just stamp me out. To allow me to have that kind of grace where I did that and I did all these things and said all these things, and I got to see the consequences. I got to live them and experience the consequences, and still actually living out and experiencing the consequences of how I lived. And I thank God to be able to go through that and to learn from it, but to not actually face the ultimate consequence of having to be cast into hell for it. It's such a blessing. So you should be voting for that freedom, because on the left, when the people go far and rebel and they go into what you would think is this huge satanic mess, it actually is what will be used to humble them through the consequences, so that these people on the left, like Jesus said when He's talking to the Pharisees, the religious leadership that was mixed with the state, how they were lukewarm, right? He said that these sinners, right? The people on the left, the homosexuals, the publicans, the harlots. He said they will enter into the kingdom before you because they see the consequences and they know what they've done. They can accept the fact of what they are and what they've done. They can actually accept the gospel, right? But the people in the lukewarm church, they think they've already saved. They're the Laodicean church, where Jesus says He spits them out, so they're not in Jesus. He says He's outside knocking on the door to be let in, so He's not in there. They're not born again. They're not in Jesus. Jesus is not in them. He says that they think they have everything, but they're actually poor, blind, miserable, and naked. So if they're naked, they have no righteousness, and they're blind to see it. They're poor, as in they don't have faith, because he tells them to come get gold, and the gold is as Peter tells us, is like our faith being tried, right? Where it becomes purified. So they're actually completely lacking in the spiritual department, but they think they're fine because they think worldly gain in success and comfort is godliness, right? And the people on the left, they can see that the right is hypocritical, and they don't want to be part of that mess. They can see that they're asleep, but they don't know true Christianity, so they think that's what it is, and they reach back and they go far into the mess, into the mire, into the filth. But you see, they become like prodigal children, where the people on the left will end up more likely coming to Jesus when it's all said and done in their lives, and truly accepting Jesus and truly being born again, where God just embraces them as they were going living with the pigs. He embraces them and crowns them, and it sets them up in his kingdom. But you on the right, thinking that, hey, you've always been there, are going to be upset that they get brought in and treated so well, because you don't actually truly care about them. It's all about you, and that's why you're doing what you're doing on your side. You want your beliefs protected and everybody else to be submitted to them by force, where you're not truly converting the other side. You're forcing them on your side. This church-state union and what's going on and what is going to happen is exactly what the founders were trying to avoid. Not that they wanted what's going on the left. And yeah, some economic issues on the left, there's all kinds of issues on the left. But you see, if you're caring about winning people's souls, you would actually go to the left because it actually differentiates between good and evil. It clearly separates the two. Where, yeah, you can see the satanic rebellion where they openly speak out against God, about Jesus Christ. And then when you stand up for Jesus Christ, you get persecuted. It shows the contrast between Christians and non-Christians. But on the right, you can't tell the true Christian from the false Christian. They're all mingled together. The good and the evil come together, and it's like, well, I don't even know if there's any true Christian there. You can't tell. Where the Christians think Donald Trump is Christian when he says that he doesn't have to come to Jesus or to God for forgiveness because he doesn't think he's that bad of a guy. He just tries to do better. And then when he was asked a second time if he would like to change that statement, he says no. Well, you can't be Christian unless you understand the fact that you need forgiveness. So he's obviously not Christian, and the left can see that he's a con man and a hypocrite, scamming everybody, as he's always done through his life. But since he's blowing smoke up the Christian skirt there, and flattering them, and pandering to them, they're going into it because they don't want to face the persecution they've been dealing with from the left, because they want an easy life. They don't want to actually be purified and pruned and molded into the image of Jesus by going through some kind of suffering and persecution to separate the wheat from the tares, the good from evil, light from darkness. They would rather just keep it all together, not distinguish the two, so that they can just peacefully coast through life. It's this Laodicean church has truly been established with this election. Not that I'm for Harris, not that I agree with her as a moral character or her policies or the thing on the left. I don't vote. I don't get into it. I'm saying if Christians were to get into it, I'm starting to think, yeah, they would be more to the left. Because at least there's freedom where, hey, on the left, yeah, you allow abortions to happen. But you're not forced to have one. You can still practice Christianity and not do those things. There's freedom. So if the people want to go do it, that's on them. And then God can convict them of their sins that they do. And they can see the consequences of them, and that could bring them to repentance. But forcing them to do the right thing, that's going to do one of two things. It's going to create a rebellion where they're trying to fight against what they're being forced to do, or it's going to just create a bunch of lukewarm people who are just doing it because they have to, not because they truly want to and truly believe it. So you're not actually creating anything good from it. So, with that being said, I hope I got the point across. Just waiting for a second to see if any other way to say it I can say, but I think I made it clear. And that's why I picked this thumbnail here, because that actually showed the church as a building anyway, in the blue and the state in the red. And it was fitting the idea of what I'm trying to say here. The church, I think, would be more towards the left and the right, just because of freedom, because every time church and state mingles together, true Christians get killed. Right? So true Christians should not be for the right in combining the church and state, because ultimately what ends up happening is this so-called Christianity that's formed once it mixes with the state tries to tell every other Christian what they ought to believe and not to believe, and if you don't go along with it, you're the first ones they kill off. Because they want to have that unity, in perfect unity. And they don't care if it's forced. If you're just like the Muslims, right? They don't care if you truly believe it. You just go along with it, or they'll cut your head off, stone you to death, or what have you, right? It's no different, because it's the same satanic spirit of the God of this world. And it's crazy because it can't be more blatantly obvious with Donald Trump, who is a liar and a snake. He's been telling you, hey, oh yeah, this woman helps out this snake, and then after she helps the snake out, the snake bites her and says, well, you're the fool. You knew I was a snake before you let me in. You dude, he's the snake that you let in. There's hundreds of contractors that he got to do work for him that he never paid because they didn't have the financial ability to go to court to fight him on it. And a lot of those companies went out of business. He's a con man, a thief. He doesn't care about the working man. He's one of those rich, pompous fools that you think he's trying to protect you from. And that's the thing with Trump. He says about the art of the deal, you got to make the deal sound so good that they believe it, not because it's true, but because they want it to be true. So he's telling you what you want to hear because you want it to be true. You want there to be some kind of hero. So you just flock to him not because it's true, but because you want it to be. You'd rather believe a lie than a comforting lie than to deal with the harsh truth. And with this, the harsh truth is that Christians, they're selfish. And they want a comfortable life. They're lukewarm. They don't actually truly care about freedom. They're just lying to themselves. So I guess ultimately, to wrap this up, you would want to be in the middle. There's no actual choice for that. But in the middle is where there's freedom, but you have something like some economic policies from the right that work better than on the left. But you still want stuff that's from the left to help out those who are in need, right? You want there to be freedom, but you also don't want there to be anarchy and chaos, right? You need a balance there. And ultimately, you don't get that. So it's one of those things where you just step back. And what I did for this few months before the election is just prayed that God's will be done. Whoever you want to win, let them win. Because I saw some Christians saying, I'm voting, so God's will be done. And they said they voted for Trump. I was like, so God needed you to vote for Trump to win, for his will to be done? I was like, no, it doesn't matter. If I vote for Trump and God's will is that Harris wins, or she won, this is past thing that happened, then Harris is going to win whether I voted for her or not. Right? But to think that they need to step in and do that. And it's kind of funny because they're like, yeah, for God's will to be done. Okay, then last election when Biden won, wouldn't that mean that that was God's will? Hmm? Something to think about there. Another thing to think about is when Trump ran against a woman, Clinton, that's how he got in. When he went against a man, a feeble, seemingly old man with dementia, he lost. But then he goes against another woman and then he wins. So you see, it seems as though the only reason why he won is because he was going up against a woman. Because if there was a man that was against him, pretty much any man, everybody probably would have voted for that man instead of Trump. They just didn't want a woman in office. So, with all that being said, thanks for watching and take care.